gotta take it, I'll take it. See if it's money out there, I'm gonna make it. I'm gonna make it, I'm gonna make it. Oh, 'cause I cry, 'cause I hustle, 'cause I cry, 'cause I hustle.
YouTube, welcome to Backstab TV, where we have enough drama for your mama. Today's story is about a postman slash pedophile pimp by the name of Matthew Tompkins, aka Knowledge. Now, I don't normally shed light on pedophiles, but this is more of a cautionary tale.
Prostitution ring were led in shackles out of the FBI's Atlantic. Are you involved in child prostitution? Investigators say this man, 36-year-old Matthew Tompkins.
Now, it could be said that Mr. Tompkins was clever enough to fool even some of the country's most seasoned pimps, having walked away with 2 life-size trophies, declaring him Pimp of the Year.
A grand jury indicted 8 people charged with recruiting girls as announced dozens of indictments breaking up prostitution rings across the country involving dozens of children.
Now, you would think the magic Bishop Don Juan and all the other seasoned pimps associated with the players' ball would have been able to recognize the fraud when they seen one. A mailman?
Attorney General says some of those children had been reported missing or ran away.
It had its origins here in the Delaware Valley. In both Pennsylvania and New Jersey. Jim, some of the indictments were unsealed here, and yes, it may come as no surprise that the ugly...
Tompkins grew up in the rough part of the Bronx, in Edenwald housing project. He wasn't a bad teen. Finished high school and did a few years in community college before landing a manager's position at McDonald's. Shortly after, he left that job for a position as a mail carrier for the New York City Postal Service. After work, during the late night hours, Tompkins would find himself cruising around the Hunts Point section of the Bronx, known as Prostitution. He was known as a trick, a John, or just a date to some of the renegade hoes. Later, Tompkins came up with the idea that he could bring some of the stragglers hanging around the Edenwald housing projects to work for him.
We have rescued more than 30 children from prostitution. Some were
This latest child prostitution ring was operating in Pennsylvania and New Jersey, sold for prostitution.
The impact locally, there were girls being provided into the casinos, lounges, and also the
The criminals were taking in children to have sex with adults. In all, 31 people were charged.
first forced to work as prostitutes in brothels and at
The ring allegedly operated between Atlantic City, Las Vegas, and New York.
Lacking the finesse of a bona fide pimp, he would have to come up with all types of tactics and ploys in order to get these girls. All the gifted guys and all the finesse that's required by a real pimp to catch a real hoe is null and void. Knowledge got the inclination to target young girls.
Well, federal child prostitution ring were led in shackles out of the FBI's Atlantic City area office this week. A business that allegedly enticed underage teens to sell their bodies for sex. Only NBC 10 was there as the key suspect.
They would frequently use for transport.
Are you involved in child prostitution? Investigators say this man, 36-year-old Matthew Tompkins, was the ringleader.
Those he can promise sneakers, cell phones, and of course there was plenty of poor and disadvantaged teens in the area in which he lived. Most of the time, those lacking the finesse to execute the game take the guerrilla pimp route. After acquiring a hefty loan from his credit union, he conned a few stragglers into the mix before putting the squeeze on them. And you better bet they was underage. Some new clothes, a place to stay, a little weed, promise of a cell phone, that's all it took. No finesse.
The Bronx native was arrested Sunday with an alleged associate while traveling in this white Hummer SUV, 98, and along with some of his underlings, allegedly resorted to violence to keep those in his so-called searching for and collecting potential evidence Monday at this home on a quiet street. The FBI also carried out search warrants at several locations in the New York City area and Las Vegas.
Fast forward to 2003. Evidently, he was able to fool the world, walking away with Pimp of the Year. Knowledge even went as far as doing a whole interview with a Florida-based magazine called Ozone, where he detailed the day in the life of a gorilla pimp. At 6'3", 350 pounds, he fit the bill quite
A
well.
New York mail carrier by day, Tompkins was known as Knowledge.
Seems like Knowledge should have figured that doing a full-scale interview in a well-known Florida-based rap magazine, showing up at the International Players Ball, and leaving with life-size trophies, that would somehow garner the attention of the feds. And so, an investigation was opened into the human trafficking of Matthew Deon Thompkins.
Did it sound at the time too good to be true?
Yes, and I said that too.
She was in jail fighting a heroin addiction. Another inmate introduced her to a man later known as the International Pimp of the Year, Matthew Knowledge Tompkins.
And told me he had a lawyer. He could help me get my son back, get me a nice job.
Once out, the woman NJTV News has agreed to identify only as MS began prostituting for Tompkins in Atlantic City, New York, Boston, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., Miami, and Las Vegas, making hundreds of dollars a night. The more she worked for Daddy, the more money he collected, and the less she saw of her son.
And obviously his goal was just to make money off of me, not for me, to help me.
She escaped but went back and later wrote that Tompkins had made me strip naked and beat me with a 5-foot-long copper pipe. She finally got away for good after 2.5 years in the human trafficking ring and helped the Justice Department send Tompkins to prison for nearly 24 years. MS is now a mother of 3. Her 13 convictions for prostitution and defiant trespass amount to a life of low-paying jobs, if she could even get those.
Sometimes I feel useless.
But under New Jersey's Human Trafficking Prevention, Protection, and Treatment Act, MS has become the first to have a judge vacate a trafficking victim's crimes committed under force or threats and to expunge and seal the record. A New York judge did the same thing last year, and she's fighting to have it done in other states.
Once this is all done and over with and my background's completely clear, I have any option I want. I can do anything. I can be anybody. I can go to school for anything. But this just has to go away.
Okay, what I have here, what I'm about to read here, is an official Department of Justice release pertaining to the arrest of Matthew Tompkins. It says, New York man enters a guilty plea to operating an interstate organization using children for prostitution. A New York City man who led an interstate prostitution enterprise including recruiting and prostituting minors in several U.S. cities pleaded guilty today in federal court. Assistant Attorney General Alice Fisher of the Criminal Division and U.S. Attorney Christopher J. Crystal of the District of New Jersey announced today. Matthew D. Tompkins, aka Knowledge, 38 of the Bronx, New York, entered the guilty plea today before the U.S. District Judge Frida L. Wolfson in the U.S. District Court in Trenton, New Jersey, to the conspiracy to transport minors to engage in prostitution and conspiracy to engage in money laundering. In pleading guilty, Thompson agreed to forfeit $748,243 in funds, 3 New York properties, 1 New Jersey properties, and 8 vehicles, all of which were derived from or used in the prostitution enterprise. It goes to state, according to the plea agreement and hearing testimony, Tompkins organized and managed the prostitution ring operating from at least early as 1999 and continuing until December 2005 in various U.S. cities, including Atlantic City, New Jersey, New York, including Manhattan and the Hunts Point, Bronx, Las Vegas, Boston, and Miami. Of the members of the conspiracy, including Melissa Rahakim, Anna Agrovis, Emily Collins Kowalski, Jacqueline Collins Kowalski, And Kimra Jameson will recruit and transport young girls to and from various cities in order to have them work as prostitutes for him. At the direction of Tompkins, members of the conspiracy will also hide the proceeds of illegal prostitution enterprise by converting the proceeds into U.S. Postal and Western Union money orders in the amount under the legal reporting requirement of $3,000. To date, over $800,000 in U.S. Postal and Western Union money orders has been identified as having been purchased and used by members of the conspiracy. To date, all of the female adults involved and 2 other associate pimps have pleaded guilty in the conspiracy and are awaiting sentences a mandatory minimum of 5 years in prison to a maximum of 30 years, a $250,000 fine for conspiring to transport minors. He also faces up to 20 years in prison and the greater of $250,000 fine or twice the gross amount of any pecuniary gain, twice the amount of loss suffered by the victims for conspiring to commit money laundering. Sentencing is currently scheduled for March the 2nd, 2007. So he pled guilty and he's waiting for sentencing. Tompkins' associate, Demetrius Loomis, 37 of the Bronx, also has been sentenced Friday and received a light 8-year sentence for his cooperation against Tompkins. Okay, here what we have here is the United States District Court, District of New Jersey. Okay, this is the charging instrument. This is the superseding information as to the United States of America versus Matthew Tompkins, aka Seymour Benjamin, aka Craig Williams, aka Brandon Williams, aka Knowledge. And it's a superseding information. The defendants having waived in open court prosecuted by indictment. The United States Attorney for the District of New Jersey charges count 1, conspiracy to transport minors to engage in prostitution. From in or about January 1999, in or about December 2005 in the District of New Jersey and elsewhere, the defendant Matthew Deon Thompkins did knowingly conspire and agree to conspire with Demetrius Loomis, Noel Lopez, Melissa Rackham, Emily Collins-Kowalski, Jacqueline Collins-Kowalski, Kendra Jemison, with others to transport individuals who had not yet attained the age of 18 in interstate commerce with the intent that the individual engage in prostitution, contrary to Title 18 United States Code 2423A. Goes on to state the object of the conspiracy. It was the object of the conspiracy to recruit and transport minor girls and others between various cities including Atlantic City, New Jersey, the Bronx, New York, Las Vegas, Nevada, to engage in prostitution for the financial benefit of the defendant, Matthew Tompkins. And so the indictment goes on to explain the other activity of the defendants and overt acts, stating in furtherance of the conspiracy and to effect its unlawful object, defendant Matthew Tompkins and his co-defendants committed and caused to be committed the following overt acts in the District of New Jersey and elsewhere. In or about December 2003, Matthew Tompkins caused a minor girl, referred to herein as Minor Girl 1, to travel from Atlantic City, New Jersey to Las Vegas to work as a prostitute. It also goes on to state that on or about July the 1st, 2005, co-conspirator Kimra Jameson caused a minor girl to travel in interstate commerce for the purpose of prostitution. This victim will be referred to as Minor Girl 2. This indictment goes on to list several other instances where Matthew Tompkins had recruited minor girls across the United States for the purpose of prostitution, some not reaching the age of 14. Now, let's talk about the forfeiture allegations. Of course, they're gonna seize all that shit that that man made on them children's backs. You know what I'm saying? On the backs of them babies. So it states upon conviction of the offenses alleged in count 1 and 2 of the superseding indictment, information, defendant Matthew Tompkins, aka Seymour Benjamin, Craig Williams, Brandon Williams, and Knowledge shall forfeit to the United States pursuant to 18 U.S.C. 982A1 and 2253A2 and A3 any property constituting and traceable to gross profits and other profits obtained from said violations, and any property used and intended to be used to commit and promote the commissions of said violation, including but not limited to the following. A. Money judgment. The sum of money equal to the amount of $748,243 in United States currency, representing the amount of proceeds obtained as a result of the offenses alleged in count 1 and 2 of the superseding information. B. Real property. All that lot and parcel of land together with its buildings, appearances, improvements, fixtures, attachments, and easements locating at one and more particular addresses described as New York, 3530 Holland Avenue, Bronx, New York. New York, 16 Tile Tulip Lane in Yonkers, New York. New York, 909 East 169th Street in the Bronx, New York. New York, 508 Central Park Avenue, Unit 5102, Scarsdale, New York. New Jersey, 719 2nd Avenue, Galloway Township, New Jersey. C. Conveyance all motor vehicles as more particularly described as follows. A 2003 GMC Hummer H2, VIN number 5GRGN23U13H100543, 2003 Mercedes-Benz SLL 500, a 2003 Land Rover RRV, 2002 BMW 745, 2002 black Cadillac Escalade, a 2000 Mercedes-Benz 500, a 1999 Lexus RX 300, and a 1997 Ford Explorer. D. Bank accounts. All United States currency funds or other monetary instruments credited to either account number blase 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 in the name of the defendant, Matthew Thompkins, and or co-conspirators, blah blah blah. And they list the money market account, a savings account, and a checking account. That's in various names. What happened is that they dropped the majority of the charges, and they allowed Tompkins to plead to count 1 and count 2. So that's transporting minors for prostitution and money laundering. So basically, they wanted to stack them up with about a quarter of a century and take that money back, man. You know? And to put a further black eye on the game, Knowledge had a square bitch laying up trying to play motherfucking Madam Pimp to the rest of these bitches. And, you know, she basically was a square bitch and wound up, you know, testifying for the government, you know what I'm saying, try to save her ass and shit, and the kids. Years later, his victims still trying to put their lives back together, even seeking expungement from the courts to get her life back on track. And I see here, according to the BOP, Matthew Tompkins, inmate ID 41135-050, is currently 54 years old now. He's located at the Allenwood Low Correctional Facility. That's the federal facility, that's a camp. He'll be released in 657 days. So hopefully he put his pedophile ways behind him and see if he can get back down with Mickey D's or something, you know what I'm saying? So he won't have to motherfucking run around here, man, prostituting our children. According to a former prostitute by the name of Tina F., she reported that several pimps were arrested for having underage prostitutes and claimed 2 years ago in Atlanta they stopped it and arrested 15 pimps and charged them. One of them had a 10-year-old girl in his stable. Damn. Tompkins is a two-time winner of the dubious award bestowed on him by his fellow practitioners at a Washington, D.C. pimp convention, the Players Ball. The statue goes to the pimp who convinces his colleagues that he's made the most money and the biggest name for himself during the year. His stable of 78 girls, each reportedly brought in 1,000 to 2,000 a night and as much as 50,000 in a weekend. He basically made a mockery of the pimp game. But it seems like some of them magnificent P's would have checked his credentials. According to a news article from September 2006, it states that by day he was a mild-mannered Bronx mailman, but by night he was Pimp of the Year, cruising New York in a flashy white Hummer and recruiting hookers as young as 13, authorities say. Former Manhattanville postal worker Matthew Tompkins, known on the street as Knowledge, has been peddling prostitutes since 1998, according to the indictment from the New Jersey U.S. Attorney's Office. The massive 6'3", 350-pound Tompkins, who was busted in December in the flashy Hummer. Searches of Tompkins' home and apartments in the Bronx, Yonkers, Manhattan, South Jersey, and Las Vegas turned up one of his prized possessions, a 4-foot Pimp of the Year statue. The 30-year-old is charged with conspiracy to recruit underage prostitutes, money laundering, as head of the Hunts Point-based hooker ring that allegedly did business in New York, New Jersey, Ohio, Boston, Atlanta, Philadelphia, Miami, and Las Vegas. One of his reputed brothels boasted an Upper East Side address at 62nd Street and Lexington Avenue. But Tompkins' ego may have been his undoing. In 2005, he allegedly gave an interview to a Florida magazine using the name Brandon, one of his known aliases. A short time later, the FBI came knocking. 6 other members of the alleged ring were charged along with Tompkins, and his purported pimping partner, Demetrius Booby Lemus, flipped last month. Lemus, who grew up with Tompkins in the Edenwald projects, admitted that he and Tompkins set up a company, Hoodlum Records, to recruit women. One of the prostitutes, Camelia Jermison, 23, said that when she was 17, Tompkins made her pose in illicit photos for ads in the Village Voice, the New York Press, and the New York Sex Guide. Later, he made her have sex with the photographer as a form of payment. In 2004, she said she brought $222,000. Matthew Knowledge Tompkins pleaded guilty last year to conspiracy to transport minors to engage in prostitution and conspiracy to engage in money laundering. When he was arrested in December 2005, authorities found 2 huge trophies in his home proclaiming him Pimp of the Year. In a letter to U.S. District Judge Frida Wolf, Tompkins had the nerve to ask for leniency. Tompkins, 37 at the time, wrote that at times he and his prostitutes who worked for him, some of them as young as 14, bonded as a family. The judge was unmoved. She gave him nearly the maximum sentence. She said, "You wouldn't send your sister or your daughter out to do that." She said, "That's no family." One former prostitute, Melissa Smith, spoke at the sentencing, saying she was practically a slave. "If he gets out, I know he'll do it again. That's all he ever talks about, pimping and hoeing." Aside from Knowledge putting itself in position to be scrutinized by the federal authorities by doing the interview with the magazine, and also by attending the pimp situations where he won the trophies. There was also an ongoing nationwide incentive called Innocence Lost. It was a cooperation to prevent child prostitution between the Federal Bureau of Investigation and the Criminal Divisions of Child Exploitation and Obscenity Sections in the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. To date, the Innocence Lost initiative has resulted in 252 open investigations, 614 arrests, 96 complaints, and 142 informations or indictments, and 106 convictions in both the federal and state systems. The case pertaining to knowledge was investigated by Special Agent Daniel Garabrandt of the FBI and Special Agent Tarek Navius of the U.S. Postal Service and inspected.
The program started in 2003. More than 6,500 children have been recovered, and more than 2,500 people convicted for trafficking related.
Do this nigga even look anything remotely like a pimp, man? You know what I'm saying? The nigga weighs 350 pounds, ashy ass motherfucking knuckles, man. No game, no finesse, absolutely. It's ludicrous, man, for a motherfucker to be a mailman. And then at nighttime and shit, masquerading as a pimp. Bust them motherfuckers, you ain't got nothing coming.
I'm making money regardless, I'm heartless. Even if I gotta take it, I'll take it. See if it's money out there, I'm gonna make it. I'm gonna make it, I'm gonna make it. Oh, cause I cry, cause I hustle, cause I cry, cause I hustle.
YouTube, welcome to Backstab TV, where we have enough drama for your mama.